Hi there. Intensifying the golden era in UK-China relations. That's the main purpose for Prime Minister Theresa May during her three-day official visit in China. Ms. May's visit to Beijing will represent the second leg of an attempt to strengthen Britain's global trading links, and later this week she will hold talks with US President Donald Trump. So what's behind May's deployment of the language of a golden era in China-British relations? With Mr. Trump casting doubt on the benefits of global free trade, is the UK turning to China as a potential economic ally? To discuss these issues and more, I'm happy to be joined in the Beijing studio by Mr. William Spears, who is the chairman of Spearhead China Limited, Mr. Cui Hongjian, director of the Department for European Studies at the China Institute of International Studies, and Mr. Anna Tangen, author and columnist. That's our topic. This is Dialogue. I'm Yang Rui. Before we get started, let's take a look at this.
British Prime Minister Theresa May arrived on a three-day visit to China and was warmly received by Premier Li Keqiang. This visit marks the first annual China-UK Prime Ministers meeting following President Xi Jinping's historic state visit to the UK in 2015. It's also May's first official visit to China since she took office, and the first by a British Prime Minister in 4 years. May is accompanied by her husband Philip and the leaders of 50 British businesses and commercial organisations. She's seeking a major economic partner for post-Brexit Britain and looking to burnish the golden era between UK and China. The two sides held talks after the welcoming ceremony. They agreed to take their mutually beneficial cooperation to a new level across various sectors under the framework of the Belt and Road Initiative. Li and May also witnessed the signing of agreements covering areas such as trade and investment, financial services, scientific innovation, environmental protection, education and bioscience.
China-UK bilateral relations are going forward continuously for a very long time, and our relationship will not change with the progression of EU-UK relations. We will have assessment discussions on investment and trade to ensure our trade relations will improve.
I'm pleased that we've agreed to intensify the golden era of UK-China relations. UK and China are both global powers with a global outlook, and you made reference, Premier Li, to the United Kingdom leaving the European Union. As we do so and become ever more outward-looking, and as China continues to reform and open up, we're committed to deepening our strong and vital partnership. And that relationship, our relationship, is indeed broad and deep, and it delivers real benefits to both countries.
China is one of the UK's largest trading partners. As Brexit looms over Britain, the UK Prime Minister's Chinese tour will aim to build on its strengths, according to global financial services giant UBS.
Gentlemen, we have a popular saying, not all gold glitters. In this context, what do you think of reasons, if any, that could help substantiate the golden era between Britain and China?
Yes, as I know, also we know that it's the first time, for the Prime Minister visit after the Brexit. And also I think, also we know because of happen of the Brexit, always there are some suspicions from Chinese side, how it could continue this very high target proposed by Mr. Xi and Prime Minister Cameron. It's a golden era. So I think that yes, I think Chinese side respect the change in UK. So in the last 2 years, we don't have any, high level, especially some mechanism exchange, except for these two twice. Mr. Xi met with Madam May during the G20 summit, but there is not kind of a new Prime Minister level meeting. This time it's the first after the Brexit, especially referendum. So I think it gives us, we would like to try find more certainties from this visit. I think it's very necessary for UK, for British side, to give some active message to Chinese side, say that okay, we should continue, we should go, we should keep the way, and we should have some more opportunity, we should look for some consensus. I think that's the biggest significance for this visit.
In the immediate aftermath of her taking office, Prime Minister May showed apparent reluctance on the project of a Hinkley Point. Now, to what degree do you think her current official visit to China should be an important part of the honeymoon that was initiated by her predecessor, David Cameron?
Indeed, David Cameron was very pro-China, as was George Osborne, which we thoroughly appreciate and encouraged. Theresa May became Prime Minister under very unusual circumstance, and she became Prime Minister very quickly. And it was very, I suppose, very sensible of her to be a shade cautious, because there are many people who are inquiring, okay, what was really going on, you know, what happened, what's going on underneath this. So it wasn't only China, it was the French as well. We had to ensure, or she had to ensure, that everything was bona fide. And it was, no problem at all. And she, in my opinion, has great confidence in the Chinese nuclear program now. And I think that's going to expand, which is a great thing. But this visit hopefully will make a big difference and create more confidence for China in the UK, because the UK has a lot to offer.
The UK was the first European power to join the AIIB, to the dismay of President Trump and the previous administration. So how does the United States look at this very special relationship between the UK and the PRC?
Well, I think you have to put it in context. What you have here is Theresa May, as you pointed out, came to power under very unusual circumstances and faces a very tenuous future. I mean, the issue for China and everyone else dealing with her is, will she be here in 6 months, 6 weeks, or whatever? She's had a number of challenges, even while she's been on this trip. Britain's, I went to school in Britain, I love it as a country, but the fact is it's been diminished by Brexit. That can be most easily established when you start looking at what happened at the World Economic Forum. When she spoke, the room was practically empty. When Macron spoke, it was waiting room only. You couldn't get in. So, I mean, there's been this diminishment. They're in a very tricky position because with Brexit, they cannot negotiate anything new because they're still part of the EU, so they can only extend. So this leaves America and China. So from the American point of view, Donald Trump, who has publicly second-guessed her within the last, 3 or 4 days, saying that she's not been handling Brexit the way he would have done it differently. He could give her some pointers. It's a very, very difficult situation. She's stuck between these two great powers. She doesn't quite know how to do it. I think they were looking for her to reaffirm the Belt and Road Initiative, restart Hinkley Point, and begin this new era. But she has been reluctant to do that, in part, I think, because she will be meeting with Donald Trump shortly, and she does not want to be presenting him that she's gone over to the other side.
Right. President Trump asks Prime Minister May not to join the Belt and Road Initiative, and therefore she wisely attached a precondition to the British acceptance of the Belt and Road Initiative, saying unless and until China could live up to the standard of or international standards, the UK would not proactively consider participation. What does she mean?
I think it's a kind of a general tone from some we call the Western countries, especially when they are faced with any kind of a proposal from China. Because I think firstly, it's just a kind of second knowledge issue, because still, I think especially for this time, Madam May is hesitant to this participation into the Belt and Road Initiative, I mean, officially. Largely, not only because of the maybe possible pressure from Washington. I think that largely it is because that Madam May have to take care or have to take consideration of any pressure from its domestic media or some criticisms on China. Because also we know always there are some people, public opinion in UK, in other European countries, once there is something from China, the first response is criticize it, and with a very, very big suspicion. So I think that it will take some more time for China and the UK, for China and other European countries. And I think, yes, China should follow some regulations and rules, no problem. But I think now we are living in maybe a new era. We need to understand we should find out the way to get some common, understanding or consensus on the rules or regulations. We should find out some problems for the existed, orders or existed some rules or regulation. we need to have some more creations to find a new way. So I think that's the reason why. Because the BRI is a very, very new, thing. It didn't happen before. So I think on this issue that not only British people, not only British government, and also other Western countries or public opinions, they should change the mindset. They should change a kind of maybe a very usual response to any proposal from China.
William, do you see eye to eye with Hong Jian?
I can understand your viewpoint, but I do disagree. I'm terribly sorry. Sorry about that. I think what we must remember is, okay, the BRI, it's part of a global change, if you wish.
Yes.
And Xi Jinping in 2013, when he put this forward, it was a great idea. And that idea, albeit it's a different culture, is being taken on gradually by other countries. The UK, for example, has its global project, if you wish now, which is very similar to the Belt and Road Initiative. And what we tend to forget, very much so, is that there's so many commonalities with the Belt and Road, with the UK, because there's so many UK companies can join up with Chinese companies on the Belt and Road process. It's win-win for everyone. It's going to be difficult, different cultures, different ways of thinking, but it will work. It takes time. Friends first, and then it gradually goes into success.
Yeah, so I'm going to disagree with you. You don't show up with a begging bowl and then start dictating the terms by which you're going to take any alms that are given. She is in a terrible position. All right, she's backed herself into a corner. There's nothing she can do. I don't know that coming off with the moral high ground on this particular thing is at all helpful. It may be a sop to Donald Trump. It may be holding the line, but they're not in a position to do that. You know, China and Great Britain have one of the lesser trade relationships. It's 3% of the exports to China from the GDP, and 7% from China to Great Britain. This is not the beginning. If you want to do something, you're going to have to come to terms. I think the last thing you want to do is greet your host by lecturing them.
Okay, but can I just come in there? I think what you must remember is since 2010, exports to China from the UK has increased by 60%.
That's because they're at such a low level to begin with.
Is that momentum likely to be sustained?
And it's very
is that
small
momentum
compared to
likely to
everyone
be
else.
sustained?
It's sustained certainly last year because of the devaluation of the pound. We increased by 25%. Now, if you take the normal sort of rise in that, there's always going to be an increase because also you must remember UK has technology. For example, even in agriculture, UK genetics is such a fine thing that China can benefit from. It can make a big difference to the way that people live here. It can make a big difference to the food chain. So
Yes, but
really,
why would you start lecturing somebody you want to trade with?
I'm talking about rising above the bits.
Then why would you start, if you're going to rise above the bits that don't matter, why would you start by saying, listen, you're not upholding what we believe are the higher standards which everyone should be adhering to? Is that the way you start a trade
One day in
relationship?
politics is a very big difference. You know
I've been
that.
in politics.
I know
That's
you
not the
have.
way I would start it.
I know exactly. It's not the way many people have started, but it started.
Especially
And
somebody in
things
a
change.
tenuous position such as hers.
Nothing is tenuous in politics, you know that. Everything
Hers
is tenuous.
seems very tenuous.
Well, in most countries. Look at your country.
Exactly. We just had the State of the Union.
Well,
it's
yes,
still
Who will
very
take the upper hand in the dogfight between Britain and the United States?
But the whole point is, I think, to be positive. This friendship is there. It's always going to be there because the Brits are reliable. They're comfortable creating things. People have to understand different cultures, that's all. Once that different business culture and social culture is understood, everything will come together.
Do they have to understand you, or do you have to understand them?
Again,
Both each other.
well, Prime Minister May came here with a 50-member delegation. Business community can't wait to sign hefty contracts with their Chinese counterparts here. Now, what will be the benefits? What will be the areas where our British partners and friends will take away the benefits that they expect?
Yes. Firstly, we can find out some common threads between two countries. Firstly, from this trip arranged by both two governments. The first stop for Madam May is Wuhan, as we know. A very big house for economy and culture in the central part of China.
I'm a little bit surprised that Wuhan became the first leg of her trip.
I find two reasons for this arrangement. I think firstly, it's in the 2016, the UK set up a new consul general in Wuhan. So which means that, how to say, the importance of this central part of China raised in the eyes of the British people and British government. So I think it's the first time for the Prime Minister May to visit this part of China, and also she did some cultural or education activity there. I think it shows a big advantage of education industry of UK, and also it's good for UK to promote its soft power, especially after the Brexit. Also, the big concern now for British government is the possible drop of soft power after Brexit happened. And secondly, yes, Beijing and Shanghai. Shanghai, we can find that a very, very interesting issue is we call this connectivity between Shanghai and London. Even it's proposed earlier, I mean, especially during the Prime Minister Cameron's administration. So now both sides try to find, firstly, I think, strengthen the traditional cooperation. For example, education, finance, and also trade, and manufacturing industry, everything. But now both sides also try to find out more opportunity for new field. For example, this just I mentioned that more connectivity, cooperation between Shanghai and London, and also new energy, and also some, for example, some. I just heard a new word about this cooperation is more trade for some high technology products. I think perhaps it will be a very, very new field for China-UK cooperation. It will be very different from the current trade structure between China and other Western countries.
Well, RMB has become one of the major reserve currencies in the basket of special drawing rights that was supported by the IMF. By the way, London has become the largest overseas RMB offshore clearing center. To what degree do you think that will help reduce the costs of trade settlements?
Well, if you remember, we had Philip Hammond over here last month, and he was reinforcing the fact that London wishes to be the centre of the RMB, in Europe, probably the world. And so I think it's a very positive point towards let's say, the relationship between China and the UK. UK loves China. Okay, some people don't understand the culture because that's the way it is, as always has been, unfortunately. But it's changing. For example, now in the UK we have 135,000 students from China, and there are 9,000 students from China from England in the UK. This needs to develop as we go on. People understand each other better, and it will just transpond into success for everyone. But it takes time. That's the problem.
And that's ironic, coming from a country which was one of the main colonial aggressors and has been in this part of the world for many, number of centuries. The U.S. is also complicit in some of those things. But I don't buy into this that we simply need to have more understanding. There's got to be a financial basis for do this. And I agree. Britain does have some very interesting technology, but they have not wedded it to anything that works here. And this impediment of them supporting Hong Kong continues to be an issue. So while these things are out there, I don't know that the golden age can exist until there is some give and take on both sides, and that means not showing up and lecturing your host.
A lot have taken place in Hong Kong, by the way, William. How difficult is it for the British government to cooperate? Cooperating might be a bit strong for the British government, but to what degree do you think you can help ease the tensions between mainland government and Hong Kong SAR government?
That's a really interesting question, especially for me, because I've always been involved with Hong Kong for many years, and it's good to see that even this week now all Chinese people can go to Hong Kong without a visa, which is bringing Hong Kong and China together more. So there's not this sort of separation, if you wish. But at the same time, You must remember that Chris Patten, who was the governor at the time, were very, very, let's say, straightforward in our negotiations. We're very honourable. The UK is very honourable and always keeps its word, or endeavours to keep its word. And gradually, things have dissipated over the last 20 years, and it has been a little more difficult for the UK. But having said that, it could change, and the UK has to either change its approach, or China has to balance things as well.
What do you think of the evolution of our relationship between London and Beijing on the issue of Hong Kong, people governing Hong Kong and one country, two systems principle?
Yes, I think that we can find out that Hong Kong played a very important role in the bilateral relations between China and the UK, because just after the turn-back return of the Hong Kong to China, it gives a very, very big space for the development between China and the UK. Because just after the 1997, China and the UK entered into a new stage, for bilateral relations. Both those countries, established a comprehensive strategic partnership, and they have a golden era, everything. So I think that, yes, the Hong Kong should be a very, very, useful, important linkage to help both the countries to find more cooperation, not the advice. Especially, I don't hope that, especially in UK, some politicians or some medias try to take use of Hong Kong as maybe an instrument to leverage against China, especially on some issue. I don't think that the situation will go in that way. Once it happens, I think Hong Kong perhaps will become a bad or negative issue between on this bilateral relations. I think that will be bad.
William, early before the visit, the Prime Minister raised the sensitive subjects of the alleged dumping of Chinese products on world markets, saying the UK would look at what more can be done to tackle global overcapacity in sectors such as steel. I believe she was referring to our alleged dumping of special steel in the European market.
I understand that. But I think it's important for everyone to realise the problem of the steel industry has been going on for 40 years. Globalisation was the beginning of the problem. And then we had no support from the government for the UK steel industry. And then we have the Indians take over the steel industry, though the Indians are pulling out now, Mattel, I think the name is. So I think that it's part of the process of globalisation. It has to be. So you have to have this partnership that understands each other's situations, understands each other's positioning with their own internal markets. So I think it's normal. I don't think it's a big problem personally.
Yeah, but it just sounds strange. You don't have a steel industry. The Tatas gave it up, and now you're saying that somehow somebody's dumping steel on my doorstep. Even if you get through this issue about whether it's being dumped or not, the fact is that China has the latest and most advanced steel companies in the world, and will continue to be producing steel until somebody else comes up with a cheaper, better alternative. So I don't understand why this is the situation you lead with when you're coming to, in essence, I don't want to say, I said beggar at the door, but I mean, she's coming here. She's in desperate straits. She needs to make something happen. Things are not going well. They're considering TPP, but that's 2025.
William, are you convinced that the current quarrels between European Union and China on the export of a special deal from China, the issue of overcapacity and trade protectionism, actually arise from your refusal to give China the market economic status, and therefore you use the surrogate approach?
I understand what you're saying, but what you must remember, look at the British car industry. It went to total decline. Now the Chinese own most of the British car industry, and it's blossoming. It's probably one of the best in the world. So there's nothing wrong with that. So sometimes you have to go down before you go up again. So I think, perhaps more Chinese get involved in the steel industry. Who knows?
The way down is the way up.
Totally. The way down is the way up.
Well, it's called a cycle. Once you reach the bottom, there's nowhere to go.
No gain.
No pain, no gain, exactly.
Right. Well, the UK has reportedly had informal talks about joining the Trans-Pacific Partnership to mitigate the impact of losing trade deals once it leaves the EU. Could the UK really join TPP? And what's the UK's Asia strategy, William?
Another good question. A very good question. I think you have to remember the Brits are very innovative okay? And any new situation needs new approaches. Now, I'm not totally au fait with, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, but what I would say is, if there's a way to make it useful, Britain will make it useful.
Okay, let me cut in here. You cannot join the TPP because while you're part of the EU, right? Well, it's not going to be quite that simple because she just outlined something that's a little bit softer. So it'll probably be 2022, 25.
Tangen, let me remind you,
Tangen,
you are very skeptical, very critical.
I'm stating the facts.
Very watchful, but let me remind you, the UK is indeed a member of the European Union at this moment, but it's not a member of the Eurozone, and therefore there must be a grey area for the British flexibility. Am I correct?
No, there is not.
No?
You weigh in. You're the European expert. They cannot negotiate independently.
Once UK has membership in the European Union, it doesn't have any right to have some more trade negotiation and agreement with other economies. So it's a recognition from EU. Maybe it's a reason why Britain chose to leave from EU, because it gets too much regulation from Brussels.
But you remind me of the steel industry. The EU regulations actually didn't help that at all. But that's an aside. But thank you for reminding me.
Let's forget about the TPP.
Yes.
British English is something that I love profoundly. It's a part of your soft power. Look at the achievement, remarkable achievement of the British Council, which has spared no efforts in promoting the influence of British culture. So do you think this will help China build the Belt and Road Initiative?
The British Council is a really fine organisation, supported by the government, but they are very innovative themselves. For example, at the moment they are thinking anew. That's why the Prime Minister was in Wuhan. They're promoting this new exchange of maths teachers and the similar. And the British Council here have made such a difference that they make us all feel part of the world, because they're not only in China, they're all over the world. And if you think about the history of the UK, we're all speaking English, okay, and 300 million Chinese are now learning to speak English. Unfortunately, we've only got 60 million in the UK, so we can't have 300 million learning Chinese. But in the UK now, we are teaching Mandarin to all the primary schools, or most of the primary schools, and within a few years, we're going to have a much better understanding of China, and will make a big difference. So the British Council has been part of that for a very, very long time. So thank goodness for the British Council.
English teaching would help generate 800 jobs in the UK. By the way, China inaugurated or embarked upon its new long march in the late 1970s. This year marks the 40th anniversary of opening up, with two textbooks. One is Voice of America, the other New Concept English by L.G. Alexander.
Always. Yes.
Your English is perfect.
Yes.
Well, I might add that I think William should be the new emissary to China from Britain, because he really speaks very, very eloquently on their behalf.
I also want to stress on this issue of culture and education exchange. Yes, I think that's a very big benefit for both two countries. Just like you mentioned that now there are more and more Chinese students, they want to get some education in UK. But at the same time, I think the UK also do a very big job, a good job to support this culture exchange. Mutual, because now UK is the biggest country in Europe to have a Confucian.
Thank you so much, gentlemen. We don't have enough time, but I'm impressed by one brutal fact. We have a global Britain, but a divided United Kingdom. So catch-22 situation. With that, we come to the end of this edition of Dialogue about Prime Minister May's current official visit to China. I'll see you tomorrow about the same topic, so stay with us. Goodbye.